quick note before we start. The channel posts 3 of these a day, but I only narrate the long versions personally on the ones that generally got under my skin. This is one of them.
I want to be precise about what the protocol required, because the precision is what made it feel rigorous enough to trust, and trusting it is what made the outcome so hard to argue with afterward. The research I was working from came out of rehabilitation studies on prosopagnosia, the neurological condition that prevents people from recognizing faces, including sometimes their own. The therapeutic intervention involved what the researchers called structured encoding sessions. Selecting a single unfamiliar face, holding attention on it for a defined interval, then logging a physical descriptor profile from memory. The claim was that repeating this over 30 days strengthened the neural pathways involved in facial individuation. I was not prosopagnosic. I simply thought it would be interesting to see whether healthy adults could meaningfully improve their face recall through deliberate practice, the same way a musician improves sight reading. I selected strangers on my morning commute. I sat across from someone on the train and spent exactly 45 seconds observing, not staring in a way that would register as threatening, but attending. I had read enough about the visual system to know that most people look at faces without actually encoding them. We recognize the people we know through expectation and context as much as through feature recall. The experiment was supposed to break that habit. I logged each session that evening in a plain text document I called the catalogue. Each entry had a date, a rough setting note, and a physical descriptor sequence I had settled on after some research: overall face shape, forehead height, brow density and arch, eye spacing and shape, nose bridge width and tip angle, philtrum length, lip proportion, jawline, and one anomalous detail: a scar, an asymmetry, something that made the face individual. By day 7, I had completed entries for 31 strangers. By day 14, I had 103. I could sit quietly and move through them like a card catalogue, pulling each face with reasonable fidelity. It felt like building a library. I was genuinely pleased with how precise the entries had become. The first sign that something was shifting came on day 16. I was trying to remember what my co-worker looked like when she was not in the room, a woman I had worked next to for 2 years, and I could not produce her face with any confidence. I told myself this was a known psychological phenomenon, the verbal overshadowing effect, where intensive verbal description of faces temporarily impairs recognition. I made a note in the catalogue and kept going. On day 19, my closest friend texted me a photo from a trip we had taken 3 years ago. I looked at my own face in the photograph and felt a faint clinical detachment, the same mild interest I might bring to entry number 67. I noted the eye spacing, the jawline. I closed the photo and moved on. I did not think about it again until later. Day 22 was when I understood that something had actually changed. My sister called in the evening and we talked for almost an hour. Afterward, sitting with my phone in my lap, I tried to picture her face. Not a photograph of her, her face, the living version I had known for my entire life. I could not retrieve it. I reached for it the way you reach for a word that is absolutely in your vocabulary, the absolute certainty that it exists, and the complete inability to produce it. There was a kind of static where her face should have been. The catalogue had 141 entries at that point, and I could describe entry number 12, a man in his 50s with an unusually high hairline and a small asymmetric scar below his left ear, with no effort at all. I did not stop the experiment. I want to be honest about that. There is something in me that wanted to see where it went, and I have been thinking about what that says about me since. By day 26, I had 207 entries. The catalogue was organised and searchable and almost beautiful in its consistency. And the faces of the people I loved had been replaced, not by nothing, but by something more like category descriptions. My sister had dark eyes and a particular way of tilting her head. My friend had a narrow face and a gap between his front teeth. These were facts. They were not faces. I knew the difference because retrieval felt different. The catalogue entries had a kind of visual texture, a rendering quality. The people I loved had become summaries. I finished day 30. I logged the final entry and closed the document. I told myself the effect would reverse, that the verbal overshadowing literature suggested temporary impairment, that the existing pathways would reassert themselves once I stopped the intensive encoding sessions. That was 6 weeks ago. My sister's face is still not fully back. I recognize her immediately when I see her. Context and expectation doing the work the way they do for everyone. But when I try to retrieve her face from the inside, from memory alone in a quiet room, I get the summary. I get the facts. The catalogue entries for strangers I spent 45 seconds with over a 2-month period remain more vivid than the faces of people I have known for decades. I have not opened the catalogue file since the experiment ended. I do not know if not looking at it will help, or if the entries are simply more durable than what was there before I started. There is one thing I have not done yet. I have not tried to encode my own face. I am not entirely sure I want to know what would happen to the retrieval if I did. If something you practiced deliberately ever changed how you perceive the people around you, I want to hear how that felt from the inside. Leave it in the comments.
I'm not going to ask you to subscribe. If you find yourself thinking about this one tomorrow, you'll come back. That's how it works.